If you're worn out from dealing with harsh, freezing winters and just as frustrated spending your summers stuck inside to escape the heat, you're definitely not the only one feeling that way. Plenty of Americans are quietly looking for the same thing, a place where the weather feels consistently comfortable no matter the season. To figure this out, I took a deep dive into real, long-term climate data to identify cities across the US where people can genuinely live their day-to-day lives outdoors most of the time, not just occasionally. For this list, I wasn't simply chasing warm destinations. I was looking for balance. Each city had to steer clear of both extreme summer temperatures and long, punishing winters that keep people indoors for months. Instead of relying on a single unusual year, I focused on long-term climate averages to better reflect what living there actually feels like on a daily basis, rather than what it's like during a short vacation. That means desert cities with scorching 105-degree summers didn't make the cut, and neither did northern towns where winter essentially puts life on pause for a big chunk of the year. The idea behind this was pretty straightforward. Find places where you can comfortably step outside, run errands, take a walk, and go about your normal routine for most of the year without thinking twice about the weather. As you go through the list, you'll see a mix of more affordable, smaller cities alongside a few higher-end coastal spots. None of them are flawless. Every place comes with its own set of compromises, but each one offers something that's surprisingly hard to find in the US. A climate that stays comfortable enough that you're not forced indoors for an entire season. Up next, you'll discover a mountain town where the summers stay unexpectedly cool, a coastal city with almost perfectly steady temperatures all year long, and even a surprising location in the Southwest that completely avoids the intense heat most people associate with that region. And honestly, one of these places might just change how you imagine your ideal place to live. Coming in at number 10 is Chattanooga, Tennessee, a city tucked right along the edge of the Appalachian foothills, and that location plays a bigger role than you might expect. Because of that geography, summers here do get warm, but they're rarely overwhelming. July brings some heat, sure, but the mornings and evenings usually cool down enough to comfortably take a walk, run errands, or just relax outside without feeling drained. Winters, on the other hand, are relatively mild compared to much of the country. Freezing periods don't tend to last long, snowfall is pretty rare, and everyday life keeps moving without major interruptions. What really sets Chattanooga apart is how livable the weather feels throughout the year. Instead of constantly trying to avoid the elements, you're able to simply go about your daily routine in them without much hassle. On top of that, the cost of living remains fairly manageable for a city with such scenic surroundings, and essentials like healthcare and basic services are easy to access. Of course, there is a bit of a downside: humidity. During the peak of summer, especially in the afternoons, the air can feel heavier than the actual temperature suggests. That said, many locals just adjust their schedules, heading out earlier in the morning or later in the evening, and for the rest of the year, the climate feels pretty comfortable overall. At number 9 is Greenville, South Carolina, a city that really stands out for how evenly the seasons are spread throughout the year. What makes Greenville appealing is that the climate feels well-balanced overall. Summers do bring warmth, but they don't seem to linger forever, and the evenings usually cool down enough to enjoy being outside without discomfort. When winter rolls in, it tends to be short-lived. You'll experience some cooler days, but extended stretches of gloomy weather and heavy snowfall are pretty rare, and any cold snaps usually move through quickly. The city's location in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains gives it a slight elevation advantage, which helps take the edge off both the summer heat and winter chill. Because of that, the year feels more naturally divided into distinct seasons rather than swinging between extremes. Instead of jumping straight from freezing temperatures to intense heat, you actually get to experience spring and fall in a noticeable, enjoyable way. That balance often encourages people to spend more time outdoors than they originally expect. Simple things like going for regular walks, visiting outdoor markets, or just handling daily routines can usually happen without the weather getting in the way. At number 8 is Roanoke, Virginia, a place that quietly lands right in the middle of nearly every major weather category without drawing too much attention to itself. During the height of summer, average highs tend to sit in the mid-80s, which means it feels warm but rarely becomes overwhelming. The nearby mountains also play a role in keeping long stretches of intense heat in check. Because of that, mornings and evenings usually cool down enough that spending time outdoors feels natural and comfortable instead of draining or exhausting. When winter arrives, it does so in a much softer way. January afternoons often reach the upper 40s, while nighttime temperatures hover around the freezing mark, giving you a sense of the season without it becoming too harsh. Snow does show up from time to time, but it typically melts fairly quickly, so daily routines aren't disrupted for long. Roanoke tends to appeal most to people who enjoy experiencing all four seasons, but would rather skip the extremes that make large parts of the country difficult to live in for months at a time. Coming in at number 7 is Charlottesville, Virginia, a place that really stands out for how steady and predictable the climate feels throughout the year. What sets Charlottesville apart from other towns in the region is that sense of consistency. Summers do get warm, but average highs typically stay in the upper 80s instead of climbing into dangerously hot territory. Plus, the surrounding hills help keep evenings noticeably cooler than in many other parts of the South. Because of that, even in the middle of July, you can still spend time outside without having to carefully plan your entire day around staying near air conditioning. Winter follows a similar pattern of moderation. Afternoon temperatures usually reach the upper 40s, while nights dip close to freezing, giving you a real sense of the season without dealing with long periods of ice or heavy snowfall. In most years, any weather-related disruptions are brief, and daily life continues without much interruption. Another big advantage is how smoothly the seasons transition. Spring and fall actually stick around long enough to enjoy, instead of quickly disappearing between temperature extremes, which makes the entire year feel more comfortable and balanced. Of course, that appeal does come with a downside: cost. Housing prices here are noticeably higher compared to smaller nearby towns, largely because so many people want to live in the area. Still, that popularity also contributes to how well-kept and consistently pleasant the city feels year-round. At number 6 is Asheville, North Carolina, and this is where elevation really begins to make a noticeable difference in the overall climate. Because it sits up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Asheville stays significantly cooler than much of the surrounding southeast. During the summer months, average highs usually land in the low 80s, which already sets it apart. What you really feel, though, is how comfortable the entire day remains. Mornings are mild and pleasant, evenings cool off fairly quickly, and even at the peak of summer, life doesn't revolve entirely around staying indoors with air conditioning. Winter does arrive, but it tends to stay on the milder side. Daytime temperatures often reach the upper 40s, while nights dip close to freezing, so you'll get some frost and the occasional snowfall without dealing with long periods of ice or major disruptions. When winter weather does show up, it usually moves through fairly quickly, allowing daily routines to return to normal without much delay. One thing to keep in mind is that mountain weather can be a bit unpredictable at times. You might run into foggy conditions now and then, along with a few winter storms each year. Still, many people are happy to accept that trade-off, since Asheville is one of the rare places in the eastern U.S. where both summers and winters stay relatively comfortable while still offering a true four-season experience. Up to this point, most of the places we've covered have been in Appalachian or foothill regions. But comfortable weather in the U.S. isn't limited to those areas. The next few locations come from entirely different parts of the country, including a high-elevation city in the southwest that avoids the intense desert heat most people expect, and later on, a coastal spot known for having some of the most stable temperatures anywhere in the nation. From here on out, the variety and the options only get better. At number 5 is Albuquerque, New Mexico, and at first glance it might not seem like it belongs on a list of mild climates. You're probably thinking a desert environment would be harsh, not comfortable. But Albuquerque sits roughly a mile above sea level, and that elevation makes a huge difference in how the weather actually feels. During the summer, temperatures can climb into the low 90s, but the dry air combined with quick evening cooldowns means the heat doesn't hang around overnight. Because of that, mornings and late afternoons often feel much more pleasant than in more humid parts of the country, where the heat tends to linger. Winter is also milder than many people expect. Daytime highs frequently reach the upper 40s to low 50s, and while nighttime temperatures can drop below freezing, snowfall is typically light and doesn't stick around for long. Instead of dealing with a long, gloomy winter, the season is often bright, sunny, and relatively easy to manage. One thing to keep in mind, though, is how quickly temperatures can shift throughout the day. In both spring and fall, it's common for afternoons to feel warm, only for the air to turn noticeably cooler once the sun goes down. Interestingly, many residents actually enjoy that daily change, since it helps avoid the drawn-out periods of sticky heat or lingering cold that can make other climates feel exhausting over time. At number 4 is Eugene, Oregon, and this one offers a completely different version of a mild climate, shaped more by the Pacific Ocean than by elevation or dry desert air. Summers here lean toward comfortable instead of extreme. Average highs usually fall in the low to mid-80s, and evenings consistently cool down, making it easy to stay outside without feeling overheated. Because of that, your daily plans don't have to revolve around avoiding the heat, which is a big shift from many other parts of the country. What really makes Eugene stand out, though, is the rhythm of everyday life. With such stable temperatures, people tend to maintain steady routines year-round. Things like walking trails, visiting local markets, biking around town, or just spending time outdoors aren't limited to certain seasons. They're simply part of regular weekly life. The overall environment naturally supports a slower, more outdoor-focused lifestyle, which many residents come to appreciate. Winter, on the other hand, is mild but noticeably gray. Expect frequent cloud cover, light rain, and fewer sunny days for a stretch of the year. That said, compared to the humidity, storms, and unpredictable temperature swings you often find on the East Coast, a lot of people are more than willing to accept a cloudier winter in exchange for the consistently comfortable and predictable summers Eugene provides. At number 3 is San Luis Obispo, California, a city that truly shines because of its sense of balance. While many coastal California towns boast amazing weather, they often come with crowds, high density, and a fast-paced lifestyle. San Luis Obispo manages to keep that signature coastal climate while still feeling relaxed and easygoing. Summer afternoons generally hover in the 70s, thanks to the cooling influence of the nearby ocean, and evenings drop just enough to enjoy long walks, outdoor dinners, or simply sitting outside without rushing indoors. You're close to the coast, but far enough from dense fog that the days remain bright and pleasant. Winter here is mild and gentle. Afternoons often reach the 60s, mornings are cool but not bitter, and most days still allow plenty of time outdoors without heavy layers. Life in San Luis Obispo naturally encourages outdoor living. Families gather in the downtown plaza, weekend farmers markets run throughout the year, and short drives take you to beaches, hiking trails, and charming nearby coastal towns. It feels less like visiting a tourist destination and more like living in a place people genuinely use and enjoy every day. The main downside is cost. Housing prices are high, but for many, it's one of the rare spots where the climate and lifestyle truly deliver on what they promise. Coming in at number 2 is Prescott, Arizona, a city that truly showcases some of the most livable climates in the U.S. When most people think of Arizona, images of Phoenix and relentless desert heat come to mind. But Prescott sits over 5,000 feet above sea level, and that elevation completely changes how the weather feels. Summers here are warm, but never unbearable. Daytime highs typically reach the upper 80s, and the dry air combined with cooler evenings keeps the days manageable rather than exhausting. You still get plenty of sunshine, but life doesn't have to revolve around hiding indoors during the hottest months. Winters are cool but relatively short. Daytime temperatures often hover around 50 degrees, with chilly nights and the occasional light snowfall that usually melts quickly. Instead of enduring long, bitter winters, the season feels brief and comfortably seasonal. What really sets Prescott apart is how normal outdoor life remains year-round. Morning walks, coffee patios, and weekend events in the town square aren't restricted to just a few months. They're a regular part of life, thanks to a climate that lets routines continue uninterrupted. One consideration is wildfire season, which typically occurs in late spring and early summer. Smoke can sometimes affect air quality, but these episodes are usually brief and don't dominate the season as a whole. Topping the list at number 1 is Santa Barbara, California, the city that all the others have been quietly pointing toward. Nestled between the Santa Ynez Mountains and the Pacific Ocean, Santa Barbara benefits from a natural positioning that keeps temperatures remarkably steady year-round. Summer afternoons typically sit in the 70s with a gentle ocean breeze, and evenings remain pleasantly mild. Perfect for outdoor dinners, walks along the waterfront, or simply leaving your windows open at night. Winter feels more like a cool spring. Daytime highs often reach the mid-60s, and freezing conditions are rare, meaning daily routines rarely need adjustment throughout the year. Because of this, life in Santa Barbara naturally flows outdoors. Beaches and walking paths fill up on weekends, downtown cafes spill onto sidewalks, and families gather in parks and plazas all year long. It doesn't feel like you're waiting for the good season. The good season lasts most of the year. Of course, there are trade-offs. Housing is extremely expensive, California taxes are higher than in many other states, and traffic can build during peak hours. But people continue moving here for one major reason. The weather rarely dictates their day. You're not hiding from summer heat, and you're not enduring a long winter just to reach spring. Most of the year, you can simply step outside and do what you planned. This is what truly separates Santa Barbara from every other city on the list. Many places offer pleasant seasons, but very few remain comfortable at both ends of the year. Being able to enjoy January outside as easily as July changes how a city feels to live in, and that's why Santa Barbara earns the #1 spot. Finding a comfortable climate in the U.S. always involves trade-offs. Some cities dodge harsh winters but deliver exhausting summers, while others stay cool in summer but come with long gray stretches. The cities on this list stood out because they minimize both extremes at the same time. No location is perfect, and the right choice depends on what matters most to you, whether that's scenery, cost of living, pace of life, or proximity to family. I'd love to hear which city surprised you the most, or if there's a place you think deserves to be on the list that didn't make it. Drop a comment. I reply to everyone, and your feedback helps shape future videos. Thanks for watching.